with this acknowledgement that we need to look at the vastity of the problem, we try to map it in these different domains. So the cognitive, the affective, the relational, the economic, and the ecological. So we see that this metabolic disease that I spoke to you about, and that this particular chart is focusing on, has different realms that we are trying to map out. So the realm of attachments, when we talk about the cognitive domain, we have this attachment to knowledge. And like we were saying before, it's a very particular kind of knowledge. So a knowledge that can index reality. And beneath that, there is an unconscious steering fear. So it's driven by some kind of sense of running away from humiliation, from belittlement, because in this modern ontology, where being is reduced to knowing, then it ends up being knowledge that establishes this hierarchy of worth, and we're constantly trying to prove ourselves through it. Behind this, we call them insatiable desires, or also hungry ghosts. There is this sense of a desire for certainty, a desire for control, a desire for authority. And it manifests in the social symptom of arrogance. Maybe we could also say this hierarchization that we spoke about in the beginning, you know, this exceptionalism. And then as a metabolic system, we see it again manifesting as superiority, contempt, disrespect. When we move to the affective domain, we've mapped an attachment to validation, like we were saying in the +1 and the -1. And it comes from a fear of worthlessness, of pain, of feeling pain on an individual level, but also on a metabolic level. And an insatiable desire for self-importance, self-image. We're going to work a little bit on that today. Manifesting as virtue, purpose, heroism, like a revolutionary desire to make one's existence meaningful in a narrativized manner, and something that can protect our self-image. And as a social symptom, then this shows itself as narcissism, as hedonism. And this is, of course, very much in favor of then what capitalism is able to provide us to satiate all these manifestations. And the metabolic symptom is infantilism, where basically we're refusing to grow up in a sense of, you know, show up responsibly. We're requesting to be coddled all the time. And obviously, coddling does not mean caring. It's a very different thing. The numbing also happens in this way, in which when we're scared of feeling the collective pain, which is so immense, then there's something that we ask for before we're able to feel it, which is also being coddled in a place of, it's okay, we don't need to feel these things, it's way beyond us, and so on. But we're all part of this. So we need to find ways of being able to move with all these processes that are happening within us. And in this relational domain, we see that there is an attachment to what we call projective empathy. Now, like this would be something of a desire to want to connect, which of course can be great, but this connection is very specific. It's specifically mediated through certain kinds of fantasies, projections, desires, expectations, and with an unconscious fear behind it of being rejected, of being abandoned. an insatiable desire for this transactional, convenient relationship, basically so that we have security, so that we know exactly what we're giving and what we're demanding. And if this match doesn't work, then bye-bye to this relationship, and we just go look for another one that's more convenient. And this is just not the way that things can continue to work. So social symptoms turn out to be things like opportunism, so looking for relationships that can be instrumentalized towards certain gains. And we also see that happening between all sorts of configurations of people, but in particular also when we try to think of decolonial approaches, this is one that shows up as something that we need to look very deeply into ourselves, whether we're really opening ourselves to dive deeply into relationships that are going to ask difficult things from us, that we're going to have to look at painful, ugly truths about everything that has constituted us, so that we don't fall into this place of leaning into this relationship just as a tokenism or as an opportunism, because metabolically then the symptom continues to be exploitation and abuse on all sorts of levels. So in the economic domain, we see this showing up as an attachment to accumulation, to, we could say also just property, because of a fear of scarcity, of helplessness. Of course, if we're not all connected, then we need to be very careful about what we individually have. And this insatiable desire for material accumulation, but also for symbolic accumulation, with the social symptoms of greed and avarice, or also as a kind of altruism that then compensates in other places. So we have to be sort of very attentive to also it showing up in sort of milder trickster forms. And the metabolic symptom then of commodification, calculation of basically everything, the whole existence. And in the ecological domain, we see the attachments to enjoyment. Let's say enjoyment of a good life. Now, there could be no problem with that if this enjoyment wasn't based on something that we have defined as a good life through very particular parameters. And so modernity has sounded like a very good life for many of us for a long time. And this has created this pressure to fulfill that within the format that modernity tells us to fulfill that. So this pressure for self-realization and self-expression through this particular frame, with an unconscious fear of death, of loss, of transformation, of change. So with an insatiable desire of consumption, of goods, relationship, experiences too. And this comes with an unrestricted autonomy. So also for many of us that have come from other strands of understanding of the word autonomy, this could be a very interesting movement to apply in particular situations where we're trying to disidentify from a particular authorship of some state or some other institution. But when this is unaccountable, when I don't have anything to answer back to, not even a wider metabolism, I can just make my own choices, not being in a responsible relationship to anything else, then that becomes a real problem. So we have to also be careful on how certain things they can play different roles depending on how they are used and to the extent on how they are used. So the social symptom again shows up as entitlement. So going back to this idea of the land as an extension of ourselves, with the metabolic symptom of negligence and irresponsibility.